Thank you. I find it amusing that the one person I didn't understand is the Israeli ambassador. I'd like to ask you all to use your imagination for a moment. I want you to imagine that you are a 64-year-old man, a gentle, nice man, a man who has never hurt anyone. You're driving along at the legal speed limit because you're a law-abiding man. You're listening to Mozart on the radio, Sonata number 13 in G major, mostly known as Eine kleine Nachtmusik. You drove like that this morning. You might have drove like that here tonight. So the radio is playing, all is quiet, and then suddenly, bang, a huge rock, a slab that someone threw with murderous intent, shatters your front windscreen, smashes your face, and you die on the road for no reason. Actually, there is a reason. There is one reason. You're a Jew. Someone murdered you just because you're a Jew. This is not a theoretical story. The man I just described is Alexander Levlovitz. He was murdered on September 14th this year on his way home from dinner in Jerusalem, just because he's a Jew. And the word said, the Jews are the ones to be blamed. A 13-year-old boy was stabbed by two Palestinian children, one aged 17 and the other aged 13 like him. He was seriously wounded, and he's still fighting for his life in an Israeli hospital. The security forces were required to shoot the attackers so that they wouldn't try to kill more children. The Palestinians distributed the photographs of the injured attackers to the world, and they were aired across the world, across the Western media, without mentioning, even once, not once, the fact that they were running with knives and attempting to kill other children. The only thing that was published was that the Israeli security forces shot at Palestinian children. And the word said, of course, the Jews are to be blamed. It is true that Palestinians have also been killed in the recent violence, but there is one difference. No one harmed them because they were Palestinians or because they were Muslims, but because they tried to kill innocent people who did them no harm. Those who equals between their murderers and our murder eliminates the very concept of self-defense, eliminates the very idea that there is a difference between the attacker and the attacked, between the victim and the killer, between the right of a democratic nation to ensure law and order and the attempt by terrorists anywhere in the world to create chaos, to provoke religious war, to sow death and destruction. Jihadi terrorism never hid the fact that part of its war was over hearts and minds. Jihadi terrorism never hid the fact that it is interested in recruiting the Western media, in using the Western guilt and the Western tendency to create balance. To achieve that, they lie, they invent stories, they stage photographs. It all works. Western media, Western liberalism, Western values of free speech have become a weapon to be used against Israel. Terrorists have no problem to manipulate public opinion in order to incite against Israel. There are countless recorded evidence to the fact they fabricate, they lie, they deceive. But the world chooses to ignore the boring facts in order to create drama. It is easier to blame the Jews, and it makes a better story. It is impossible to stand here in Berlin and discuss the murder of Jews for being Jews without us all thinking about the Holocaust, especially because tonight we will mark the 77th commemoration of Kristelnacht, the night in which the land of Germany was covered in broken glass, stained with Jewish blood. The state of Israel was created after the Holocaust, and if not for the Holocaust, if not for the terrible scenes witnessed by the world when the Allied forces reached the concentration camps, Auschwitz, Dachau, Mauthausen, where my grandfather was. It is hard to imagine that the United Nations would have voted for the creation of the State of Israel in November 47. The question that pursues us since is, what have we learned from the Holocaust? What is the lesson? These questions troubles German society, but it also troubles Israeli society. It is troubling because we ended the Holocaust. The Jewish people ended the Holocaust with a dual lesson. The Holocaust taught us two things, two very separate lessons. The first lesson is that we have to survive. Survive at all costs. Survive on our own. Not to trust anyone else. Not to believe that someone will come for the rescue. Us, and only us, on our own merits, with the strength of the Israeli army, need to protect the Jewish people from all those who wish us harm. Survival is not just an ancient instinct that we share with all our neighbors in the jungle of human existence. In our case, it is also an historic command. We must survive because the Jewish idea cannot perish. The second lesson we learn is that we must be moral people. Not in words, but in deeds, in the decision we take and the risks we take. On the wall of the Holocaust Museum in Washington, engraved the 3 commandments written by Auschwitz survivor Professor Viktor Frankl. Don't be a victim, don't be a collaborator, and don't be a bystander. The problem with these 2 lessons is that in many cases in the life of our state, they contradict one another. If you wish to survive at all costs and remain moral, then you need to take especially difficult decisions. It is hard because our enemies have no moral boundaries. Terrorists from ISIS or from Hamas are medieval people with 21st century weapons. Faced with these people, if you don't fight without hesitation, you will die. If you don't maintain your morals as you fight, you're at the risk of becoming too much like them. It's an agonizing struggle, daily, bloody, with no easy answers. Yet in comfortable living rooms here in Berlin, in Paris, in Washington, and in Stockholm, sit people who has all the easy answers. They tell us that we're not managing this conflict the way we should have. We're not aesthetic enough. If only we behave differently, then terrorism will cease. It isn't right factually, Because terrorism came long before any occupation, and Islamic terrorism is running wild in places with no connection to Israel. It is not right historically, because twice, in the year 2000 and in the year 2008, Israel offered the Palestinians more than 90% of the land to create a state from themselves. Twice they preferred to reject the offer and continue on the path of terror. And it isn't right morally, because from India to Rwanda live people in far harder conditions than the Palestinians. And no one believes that justifies them turning to murder and terror. Today, there were 3 terror attacks in Israel. Today, 5 Israelis were wounded, 2 of them badly. When Western liberals say that it is all to do with Israel's behavior, then it's not just an explanation of what is going on. It is also a justification. The murder of innocent civilians can never be justified. There is no... There is no justification for 9/11. There is no justification for ISIS burning people alive. There is no justification for the fact that in Syria over 250,000 people have been killed. And there is no justification to the stabbing and killing taking place in the streets of Israel in the last weeks. And yet, since 2006, Israel was condemned in no less than 62 United Nations Human Rights Council resolutions. The entire world combined was not condemned that many times. In these years, we had massacres in Syria, in Libya, in Congo, in Iraq. Millions has died, but they kept on condemning the one country that is doing everything in its power to avoid hurting the innocent. The last example is, of course, the European Union intent to label products coming from the West Bank and the Golan Heights. This is not a legal issue. This is politics. This is classic BDS in disguise, playing dumb while trying to pre-rule the future borders before any negotiation starts. Adding the Golan Heights while knowing also well that there's not a single Palestinian living there, not even one. And there is no one to give the heights back to. It's time to stop focusing on Israel and start focusing on those who condemn us. Why do they do it? What are the real reasons that they prefer to ignore the facts? What is the dark difference, the internal one, which causes them to condemn Israeli democracy and not our murderous enemies? What makes them want to label goods from Israel and not from Rwanda or Syria or Congo or Iran? However, Israel is not exempt from the constant requirement to strive for a diplomatic solution which will allow us to separate from the Palestinians on the basis of the 2 states for 2 peoples. Not because we accept the justness of their cause, we don't, but because our national interest is not to try and absorb 3.5 million Palestinians. In order to keep a clear Jewish majority, we must separate from the Palestinians while maintaining the security cooperation and the ability of the Israeli Defense Army to operate anywhere and without restrictions. We need to embark upon a process which will be painful and complicated for both sides, but will also lead us to the place God promised us during our journey in the desert. יברכך השם וישמרך. יאיר השם פניו אליך ויחונך, יישא השם פניו אליך וישם לך שלום. May the Lord bless you and protect you. May the Lord smile at you and be gracious to you. May the Lord show you his favor and give you his peace. Numbers chapter 6, verse 24-26. This journey won't be short and it won't be easy. And we need our friends to help us on the way. We need you to ask the media and the decision makers the tough questions about the obsessive bias towards Israel. We need you to help us tell our story. The real story, not the twisted propaganda that took over the public arena. We need your friendship and deep commitment, and we need to know that we do not walk alone. Thank you and bye.